Oh, right. Cool. So actually, this is one of the projects I did with a student of mine in the past, and it gives you, as a learner, a logical understanding of how game loops work. Now, this is going to be without the fancy graphics and all the factors that involve a, you know, live two-dimensional game, but remember that most games started as text, right? I don't know if you've ever played a text game, but when you make the storyline intriguing, you don't have to go crazy on the visuals. In fact, if you look at indie games, it's not the graphics that make an indie game good, it's the gameplay, it's the story, it's the mechanics. So, in this case scenario, we're simply going to learn about the game loop, logic, and how to basically organize your own storyline,
Mhm.
and a big comparison to how we generally take um, any type of. Ooh, a little bit loud. We take any type of linear process and we can adjust it. Now, this is, in a way, a clarifying response to Pirate Software's way of basically magic numbering everything and taking it into a more logical attempt to organize your storyline so that you're not just going in a linear fashion, but you're making it more dynamic. You can go backwards, forward, and even skip around a bit, but with limitation. We'll be doing a dungeon crawler, a textual dungeon crawler. Will we finish the whole thing today? Possibly not, but it's a great start for where we want to essentially begin. And it will be done in JavaScript. So the JavaScript format, again, super easy to play with. Anyone can get started coding and basically gives you a good base for the actual meat of the subject. It's the logic and organization, not the language or the fancy graphics. If, you can attach it to graphics too, but that takes more time at the end. So, the first thing we'll always need in any JavaScript case is a decent basic HTML shell, which starts like this. Every HTML file requires us to make a base setup here. The head is for any configurations we need to do, and the body is for essentially the visuals that we want to put forward. So we want to do multiple files though. The key is we're going to have a new file here. We'll call this adventure.js, a pure JavaScript file. And also a little bit of a hacky method here, because when you're dealing with clients in Chrome and Firefox, for security reasons, they don't have access to your file system. So we can't really create a separate JSON file, um, but we can kind of work around that with a data.js. So we're using data.js as a container for the story. And once we basically configure the logic, all we have to do is expand on this particular data.js to create the full story. But we have to structure everything accordingly, logically, and pretty, well, you'll see, in an organized manner. So in order for us to take these files in, it takes a script tag, and we'll basically do this through the uh, header here. The header is the setup space. We'll go ahead and throw in our adventure.js to import.javascript. And for the data, we kind of have to make sure for the data that we have, um, the data get loaded last after the game is essentially working. And there's a kind of a workaround again with how we're importing this data.js. Now, normally, again, if we're doing this on a server, on a individual language like C, C++, well, this data file would be, or Python even, this data file would probably be a JSON file. And it is basically structured like a JSON. It's basically a JSON in a return function. That's how we can hack around this sort of limitation of browsers not being able to search and import files unless it's already built in, or particularly JSON files. which, for the record, JSON files will end in JSON. So there you go. But JS JavaScript files are the ones that are allowed by the browser to be imported. So let's see, we're gonna need a container here in the body. I'll go ahead and open this up real quick so we can visually see the process. Like so. I will also kind of do a side by side here. We don't need too much space. And we're going to start building up our container or our interface, our main interface that's going to basically handle the interactions between the user and the code. We've done this before in a workbench case scenario where we're essentially taking in an input, parsing it through JavaScript, and then making a decision based on that input. Are we going to Google, YouTube, or whatever kind of command we give it? This one's going to be a bit more structured on the case for managing just basically a selection of buttons, right? So we'll need a div. Div are dividers that basically hold any sort of internal content, elements, tags. All of these, by the way, are HTML tags. And really important to kind of take a real good look and distinguish differences between the languages. You'll see HTML tags with these less than greater than signs. It's just typical of HTML. It's typical of XML-based documentation, document writing. In fact, if you look at any like Office applications, Word, they all basically use this sort of notation. But the key for it is that it's a visual representation of dividers, boxes, and anything that we define as an object on our white page on the right side. So a div is a divider. We want to give this the ID of main. This is going to be the main box we're going to be manipulating for our game interactions. And like any sort of text game-based system, we'll need a div for the message, and then a div for the options that we're going to be taking in or choosing from to progress the game. So now we've got our base interface. Nothing's going to change though, because we haven't put any content in them. These pieces, test 1, test 2, are right here. Nothing intense at the moment. Although we do want to maybe do some visual adjustments. So we'll go to a style in our head here. We will take our main ID, give it some modifications, maybe a font size of 2em, just double the size of the font. But that's the main, so let's do a message on that. We'll just do the message ID. There we go. Maybe even 3em for message, and for option we'll do a font size of 2em. It's basically a type of multiplier. There we go. Just to give each one a specific size. Maybe for main, we may want a background color. So let's give it something here to distinguish its presence on the page. Something simple like a gray. Not gray. Let's do like a light, like a CCC slight off gray. There we go. A nice small separator there. Cool. So this is essentially our interface, but of course right now we're going to see how we're going to be manipulating these two cases. We need to actually change the text live. It's not going to say test 1 and test 2. We need to continuously update them based on the game logic. So then we go to adventure. With adventure being the main focus, we basically want to do a couple of things. We want to create an onload function that will begin the game. And then we want to create a game loop function, which will essentially go through the loop and either cancel based on you completing the game, pressing a key for quit, your typical sort of like go to the menu and then select your option, right? The game loop continues on a menu until you make a selection that, you know, takes you to a particular part of the game. The single player mode, multiplayer mode, options, or quit. The game loop continuously exists in the background, and this is essentially what we're creating here. Now, we also want a option generator. Very generic way for saying, I just want the ability to create options as I'm moving across the level. The options for the player to essentially explore the environment. So based on these three factors here, we start up some of the processes. Let's see, the first thing we want to do on load is to, let's see, we got to check if it's already running, but in the first load situation, we just basically run and maybe do some setup. Maybe we can do a load of a save if we have a save game. Those are the cases we can do for the onload, but for now, I'm just gonna start the game loop. And because we don't have quite a save happening right now, we're starting up from a starting situation. We don't have a load, so we'll start from start. Which means game loop, redundancy at the moment, simply because we're structuring our code for future expansion. The game loop then begins looping, right? While true. Oh, I'm doing Python all of a sudden. Excusez-moi. While true. And let's say this is entry. The entry would be the start, and if we had a loading case, we'd adjust that to a load. But our entry at this point, since we're basically starting off the game, is going to be a start. So while true, and if, let's see, if entry equals to start, we want the level equals 0. So basically starting off at the beginning of our level structure. So while true, we start our option generator. We essentially want a couple of things. We want to go into option generator, figure out where we begin, and that's where most of the code will go. We want to go into option generator, give it the current level, and then return the next level or the still current level. Basically, each game loop that passes, or each loop of the while loop, we're going to continuously keep track of the level that we're in. So not only am I going to call option generator with the level input of the function, I'm also going to update the level with a variable save. So not only do we go in, we come back out, and then we can essentially do the loop again, continue from wherever we left off last. Well, this is where most of our actual coding is going to be as far as our current project status. We are wanting to, of course, return the level, but let's go ahead and take in our level here. And we input. So remember, functions basically just input information from one to transfer it over to the other. The function statements are what we create the blocks of code. And without the function statement, basically just right here in its own space, well, that's just the activating factor of the function. So we run the code block from down here. And it just happens over and over, right? Game loop runs this game loop, it runs this code, and then continues going to the next level, which would be the option generator. Now, for us in the HTML space, we want to manipulate the page itself. So the first couple of things we want to do is essentially grab our locations in the document. We want to grab our message and our option and then manipulate them to basically change the values through JavaScript live as we are progressing through our game. So what I need to do is apply, or we're going to get a variable, and keep in mind var or let are going to do the same thing. In JavaScript specifically, let is the newer generation of methods or ways to create a variable. So we're going to use let instead of var. I like var because it makes sense. It's variable var. But hey, we just keep getting further and further away from the bare definition. So we're gonna get the HTML message location, which we have to find using the built-in document DOM structure. So we're gonna take document dot get element by ID, and this is why we named the ID equals message. We want to grab it through this search. This is basically like a search. It'll go through the whole document and look for that specific ID. But we'll do the same thing. Document for the options. We're gonna do get element by ID, and this time options. Now there's two case scenarios. There's IDs and options, classes. Right now we're only using IDs, and IDs are specific to a single instance of that thing. Classes, you can have as many as you want. You can duplicate, have 2 messages, 3 messages, or a bunch of like, basically like this, right? If this was a class, this would be no problem. But because it's an ID, we can only have 1 instance. We cannot have so many copies. That's a key detail to remember when we're dealing with classes and IDs in HTML specifically. Right, so we grab our data, but what do we do with it? Well, we can basically change it live right now. So we can say HTML message, hello world, and then HTML, oh, hold on, almost. We need to actually invoke the inner HTML for this. This is a variable that contains the HTML values. Some world options. Let me make sure everything is saved. And of course, check your debugger, see what we have here. Ah, well, you know what? I never actually started the game loop. I created all the functions, which is a good point to kind of reflect on. I created the functions, but none of them actually started the chain of events. I need to activate onload so that onload can invoke game loop can invoke option generator, and the process begins. But I haven't even started the onload process, which means all I have to do down here is create a small script space and invoke onload. See, true lowercase, while true. Yep, I was doing the Python method there. So hello world, inner option, oh, case scenario, when you mix up your variable names, I put a S at the end for my actual get element ID. So even the slightest, don't get too frustrated by it, even the slightest little differences will cause a, uh-oh, did I cause a infinite loop now? Let's see. It worked a second ago. Ah, maybe, because now it's gonna continue back up here. There's another way to create a loop that doesn't go forever. Let's see. This one is actually going to not only go through, print the details, but it's going to do it in a circular method. So yeah, technically I've created right now a infinite loop. If I do this though, that breaks it, interestingly enough. But when it runs properly, the infinite loop continues. But that's because this case scenario causes an error, and that stops my infinite loop from getting activated. So this case here is like, hey, there's no such thing as options with a plural, therefore the infinite loop doesn't actually work. So let's do a quick, for now, we need to activate clicks. So maybe yeah, we will activate by a clicking mentality. We don't want a infinite loop here because the program will continue to go indefinitely, but we don't want to move on to the next stage until a click happens. So what we need to do is actually during the generation process, we're going to remove just the while loop for now. Because in this case, if I was making like a snake game and the snake is constantly moving across the screen, yeah, then it makes sense to create a loop because the snake is going to be drawn over and over and over. So we'll keep the while loop out of the business right now. We actually want our game to progress based on user interaction, not based on the program's ability to loop really quickly. If we had an animated game, sure, then we can let the snake continue to animate as necessary with a while loop, the game loop itself. But for now, our game loop is actually going to be pretty simplified because the activating factor is the user interacting with our game. All right, so here's where we start to create the interactions. First, we need some placeholders. We need to basically just create a very simplified version of the starting point of our game. So we go with a level. Our entry is start. Level is 0. So if level equals 0, we can make a kind of process here, a simple shell that we start with, and then we can expand it to our data JSON, which will hold our actual levels, and we don't have to hard code them into the game. Again, in many cases, you have to remember, if you've watched any of the Pirate Software guys' streams, he codes things directly. It seems like he uses live arrays within the code when he should be essentially organizing everything in a side data set, and then using a logical structure of key to value pairs and arrays and kind of like JSON structure to organize everything nicely. But for now, we're not going to use that just yet. We need a starting point. So let's say we say level message equals, we'll start with a simple welcome to the adventure. And for level options, we will essentially use JavaScript and HTML's nice interaction with each other, where we can input HTML values, but now we got to play with different quote types. So here's the details on that. This actually works extremely strict in PHP, but notice I'm using, for regular strings, a simple double quote. Then I'm expected to now add some HTML tags in here. I'm not going to use the regular quotes because there is a mixture. Remember, with our ID message, we actually had quotes in it. So we're going to start kind of conflicting our own JavaScript injected HTML. And we don't want to basically interfere with the typical writing style with the double quotes for ID, double quotes for source, double quotes for basically all of these sort of extra inputs. So we use just this, kind of the tilde, the slanted quote, to hold our button that we want to activate. We'll create it using this and it'll be a simple start text. This is where you'll notice they will not interact. They will not conflict. But notice if I decided to put quotes around the word the, it starts conflicting with the outside quotes. So this is why alternating quotes, especially when you're essentially using code inside of code inside of code, make sure you're kind of leveling it out nicely. So this is a no-no. This would kind of mess stuff up. What this does is it says, hey, the is an actual variable, not a string of text, at least in the Java case scenario. So how's the proper way to do that? We would have to put a plus here and a plus here, but that would mean we'd need a variable called the. It wouldn't really print anything because we don't have a variable called the. So I'm going to remove it altogether just to show an example, right? This is why we're using tilde on the outsides, and then inside we're going to set up our buttons that will activate the adventure events. So here's a class option and start text. Kind of give it some values to identify it. And I've got a bit of a template here that I used before, so I'm going to follow that, at least for the case before we start improving upon it. Now, this is how we activate any button interactions. In our case, in JavaScript and in HTML, there's a nice little, basically you can put this anywhere in divs and buttons and text and links. It's an on-click direct listener that's within the HTML element. So not only does this span a tag in HTML have a class naming option and start text, but it also has this extra little attribute for a listener. Whenever this text is clicked, we can run a certain function. Well, this is where our technical, one would say, game loop begins. We want to activate the option generator with a particular direction. So for us, we're going to go from level 0, which is the beginning, to level 1. This is the simplified version of what we want to accomplish here. And again, I'm alternating. I'm doing a lot of quotes. The tilde is the outside quote. The double quote is for the on-click value. And then the single quote is for the number 1. It gets trippy when you're kind of injecting code inside of itself. So keeping track of each type of quoting will basically make life easier, but also very complex, at least until you get used to it, right? So again, double quotes for the on-click, single quote for the number 1 being a string, and then a tilde for the whole kind of JavaScript selection here for our string. But what we're doing is we're creating an on-click event that will reactivate the adventure space, the option generator. And we're inputting, actually, I wouldn't really need a string one because we're gonna, I don't know. I'll keep it a string because we might like strings better. We might be a bit more specific with the strings. Depends on how we expand the game loop later. But then again, I would have to make this a string 02. So let's just call it 1. Let's call it 1 for now. If I have to modify some stuff and expand on it, we'll do so. So it will input a integer 1 into option generator when the user clicks on the span text. And the span text will basically be something super simple. We got, of course, close off the JavaScript code with a semicolon, close off the span with a greater than, and then start game. And then close our span finally. So there's at least the first case scenario. Now instead of hello world and some world options, we have level message based on a if statement and level option based on a, I guess, if statement again. There we go. So now we're loading the first level, and this is how we make it generate on a particular case scenario. Right now, level 1 is kind of your starting point. It's built in. We probably won't keep it built in, but for now, a good place to start. So what happens when we're not on level 0 and we start going to level 1, which in our case, let me see, it's not activating. We can always inspect and make sure that our on-click is indeed there. Option generator is correct. This case would be interesting then, because if we're not using a while loop, there's no reason to return anything. So we don't need that. Now the on-click should start, at least give us some details, but there's no if for level 1. So let's do else just to make a check. And then we'll say level message under construction. Okay, there we go. So it is activating the start, right? We have else as in any other number. First we have 0, it's activating the first level, 0. Then we have else for every other case scenario. Now, we may want to have a quit button, so we can basically create that quit button with a extra set somewhere on the side, a little, I guess, span again, and we can make a specialized case for a Q or -1. And if -1, we end the game. So from now though, we're really interested in expanding into our actual list. So I have a set of data, not this one. This is what it looks like as far as a simple organized factor. I'm gonna grab the set of data, throw it over. And here's how we could read this. Stage 0, essentially what we have currently. In our adventure built in. Stage 0, well, it's not the menu, but stage 0, I think I can call that 1. I did use strings here, so a little bit messy on that case. But let's see. Ah, true. Stage 0 load. That would kind of conflict a bit with the previous version that I made. So maybe I'll just use that as a reference point. So let me see. I've got the load, I've got the data. I have to actually, yeah, take in the data. So I have to load my data here. Var levels equals adventure data. It's going to bring it from our function here. And in our case, we want to import it with a adventure data reuse. Throw in the data and the levels equal data. This is just a method to essentially import the JavaScript file without having to have the same file of data in the same JavaScript space. Guess it could have been a simplified version, just creating the function itself, but hey, that's all right. Now let me make sure. If I console.log my levels, it should print out the set of levels in my browser. Yep, there we go. So you got level 1, wake up in the middle of a dark room, or dark space, should be room. 2, you feel around for an object, and then some tests for level 3, 4, and 5. So it's an incomplete project, but the common sense here is that we're essentially going to be creating that loop to continually go through the levels as we progress, and then we just adjust this file. That's it. After the loop is fixed, finished, and basically self-churning, all we have to do is construct our game, our adventure game, based on the adventure data. For stage 1, stage 0, computers count from 0. Stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, 4, 5, and it'll be mechanical. We're gonna have to use some loops to test out how many possible options there are. So we can have some stages with 2 options, some stages with 3, 4, 5, different sets of options to have. And that's because we're gonna use a for loop. Okay. So instead of under construction, now we can consider the new level that we're adding. So after I click start game, we start with level 1. In fact, it kind of makes me want to make 0 this the loading screen. What I can do there is a simple up on the digits, stage 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I can create a new set above it. Call that 0. Create the welcome to the adventure. Put that in the message. We're going to have one option for starting the game. And we have now our adventure level. So we're going to take... We won't even potentially need an if statement, because we'll just follow the sequence of 0, 1, 2, and forward. But heck, current level equals levels in the level space. In our case, 0, it's going to pull the 0 set information. Then we can extract some details like options or current options, which would be current level and options specifically. So current level options. From there, we can throw in our current level message, which will basically take welcome to the adventure from our data set and then throw it into our level message and then throw it into our page as we get that chain reaction happening. So it's always important to get a baseline statement process and then expand into more complexity. Then we want to get the option here, which will be start game. And then that'll take us to stage 1, beginning the game. But even stage 1 is going to be a counter. So we have to really realize we're doing a JSON list with key value pairs inside. So the very outside are these brackets, which list everything in a typical array standard. So this is the array 0 location. This is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, or in that case, 0 through 7. But each one on the inside has its own set of values. And that kind of structure helps us organize everything in numerical sense because indexes are numerical. And then the key value pairs are a lot more detailed. So it gives us the ability to use actual wording formats to access information. Not everything has to be magic numbers. But in our case here, we just pulled out level 0 options. So this is the one here. Welcome to the adventure. Start game is the option. We extract the options, save them into their own variable for ease of access. And then we extract the message, save that into level message. For our option then, we do want to adjust because we're basically not gonna need, potentially, not gonna need any of this. We don't need any if statements anymore. We do, however, need a loop to apply potentially multiple options. The loop is basically going to count. We'll take I equals 0, starting point. We want I to be less than the current options. Dot length, however many options we have in that list, that's how many times we're going over that list. And then for every option we go through, we increase I to the next digit, 0, 1, 2, and so on. Now, level options, let's call this an S just to make sure that's the case there. And throw that back in here. If we have one option, that's fine. But there's a trick with JavaScript, Python, basically any language, and it's called string concatenation. Right now, every single new set of option tags are gonna get it's gonna erase the previous case because an equal sign basically takes whatever we had before and then erases it and puts the new data in there. What we want to do, very simple change. If you want to basically add on to the previous details, like we had option 1, option 2, option 3, and we want to make them a long set of details, right before the equal sign, put a plus. That's it. All that's going to do is, hey, whatever was inside before, now it's going to have this attached to the end. And we just string along extra values for as long as we need. But that means we kind of need a starting container. We don't have a level options starting value. We have HTML options, but not level options. So here, I'm going to create let level options equal to empty, just to get that set up. Now, JavaScript's not going to complain that the variable doesn't exist and we're trying to save something new inside. It does exist, it's empty, so just keep tacking on extra text at the end. That's the base idea. We may not need to do that for the level message. Well, let's go ahead and take that into account. Level message is going to equal, because the message should be a single message. Current level message. Well, we don't have to do that. Yeah, it's already been done. This is just for the options. So now stage 1 activates once I click that, and we should open up 3 options after I click start game. Essentially, if everything is fine and I didn't get any errors. There we go. But I do have something on. Start game, start game, start game. Oh, right, I didn't change the values of the individual pieces. So our message changed to stage 1, which is in our data set. So you wake up, or this was the old one. Let's move this back here. There it is. Stage 1, you wake up in a dark or in the middle of a dark space. Nice. But the problem is I didn't modify the options here to have any particular adjustments. This is where I go into my level options and I have to adjust these potential options based on the current level data sets. In those data sets, we have some values. We have, actually I might want to put this back. We have stage 3, stage 2, stage 1, and just a set of values that we can adjust where to go. So instead of having each one be hard-coded, another case scenario for not using magic numbers but pulling from our data set, for the option generator, the next level in our sequence, I essentially want to load it up with the next possible stage, or the current level, options, and then stage of the value. Well, we gotta really keep track of the variables. So right now, current level is the levels object, which is going to be in this case this whole thing with the image and everything. Then we take options here, which basically just goes inside a current level, takes the option space, which is just a section here, and we go through it. That's the thing we're using in our loop. We're going to the option, current option.length. That's the amount of options we have available. And we're going through them. And for each option, we basically tack on this string. Further in though, we want to keep using this variable as the sets of information inside. And because we are using a numerical index, we can go through 0, 1, and 2 case scenarios. 0 is the first option within our array, 1 is the second, 2 is the third. A little bit of off by 1 calculation there. So what I want to do then is adjust this right here, making sure I keep track of my tilde because that is the outside. So let me do this here. Maybe a bit better to see it top to bottom. I'll take the 1. I don't want to always go to 1. I want to essentially make this dynamic, so this is where we use our variables. Here, I'm going to look inside current options, and then the value in which we're currently looping through, so whatever I is at that moment in time. And inside of I, hello Kish, doing well, doing some programming. How you doing? How's life? Welcome in, by the way. Glad to have you. Let me adjust my scene here real quick. There we go. So we take our current value options, current options of the current level. We take I, the increment that we're going through in our for loop. This is why for loops are fantastic. They let us go through a set of data and pull each individual piece that we need based on stuff. No problem. Glad to hear you're good, man. Glad to hear you're good. Life is good sometimes, yeah. And then after we get that specific I value, well, they all have the same key value pairs. Action, the action we want to have, and then the stage. The stage is what we want here. So I want the number of the stage that I'm going to access, and I'm going to use single quotes to separate the differences there. And now instead of hard coding level 1 in here, we're actually going to pull the stage from the value here. And for each one, each option, which we also have to change because I've only got basically just start game, start game, start game. I didn't manually change or dynamically change the text either. A little bit of programming, a little bit of HTML and stuff like that. I use OBS to do all my kind of adjustments. I mean, if you looked at the background, we got these little animations I've done too. I got a couple of other ones. So a lot of it's just kind of just playing around with JavaScript. Here's another one. Hold on, let me show you. Let me show off a little bit. Voila. That's one. There's another one. Just some custom animated JavaScript. I'm a big fan of JavaScript. It's basically super simple. You don't need to like install anything crazy on your system. You load it up in a browser and it just works. Always fun. And then when I play horror games, I got these little horror eyeballs. So, pretty fun stuff. It's just playing around, having fun with code. But like and subscribe if you want to learn more stuff. I do normally coding, technical stuff, IT, Python, JavaScript, all kinds of stuff. So keep in touch if you like this kind of stuff. Chat around, ask questions. I always am happy to answer questions and go into the details. But welcome in, glad to have you. Where is my thing now? I lost my. Okay, this one? This one. Okay, cool. Back at it. Thank you. Appreciate it, man. All right. So instead of having this same thing print 3 times for the loop, because there are technically 3 options in level 1, right? Options a length of 3. And it is going 3 times, but it's not pulling that option itself. It's actually just printing the built-in text. I do a little bit on that, but I do like games. If you ever seen Grey Hack, I do Python, so I have a video on how to basically create a little socket network on your own network, so you can kind of communicate between 2 computers using Python. Simple things, nothing crazy. Now from here, got a start game that we want to adjust. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to actually literally just copy this section because I do want that. It's my direct access to the internal values. And instead of stage, I'm just going to use action. I'm going to copy that, replace start game, and then replace action. Now, when I refresh, start game, yeah, it's getting there. It's getting there. I do have to kind of adjust these options. They don't look very separated. Uh-oh. Do this, do that. Oh, look, the squirrel. We're basically now traversing through our world because it's already made. We finally basically constructed our game loop by the clicking process. And that's really it. We've just completed the whole game. The next steps really is to construct the full game to work through the messages. Create a message, the action you want, in this case just start game. But then from there, you move around with the stage value and you create new stages and you link them together in the way you want over and over and over. And that's it. The loop is complete, other than maybe making it a little bit nicer to look at. Because again, we're not going for the fanciness of it. We're going for the logic. We're brain thinkers here. So, well, let's see. Option. Font size. Maybe I'll do a border. 5px. What was it? Black first, actually. Black 5px. No. Oh, wait, hold on. Yeah, ID option, test. Ah, true. I have to adjust it based on the class option. I see some conflicts. Hold on. Naming conventions are having a little bit of conflicting aspects here. So option is a class. So I actually give this to dot option. Because it is a class, it gets identified as a dot value. And then I have to modify. There we go. All right, boom, boom, boom. Okay, fine. But I'm still not seeing class option adjustments. Line width, line style, right, solid. Okay, there we go. So now we got our button border, our options. We put some margin around that. Give it some space. Nice, nice. And then from there, we've essentially got the loop constructed. Now, there's no logic to my particular set of levels that I've created, but it's all based now on that one data file. Creating the text adventure from here is just creating the levels in this data set. And that's it. You don't need to have any linear set of values and all kinds of stuff that Mr. Pirate Software likes to have. And this is basically one of the simplest ways to create a storyline. And again, super simple because we're doing it in text, not having to worry too much about the visuals. But having a decent logic in the textual storyline, you can expand that to any sort of sense. In a 3D sense as well. Create a game, character goes to a door, load up a new part of your storyline. So it's very funny. Mr. Pirate Software has created such a spaghetti code that he didn't. I mean, it took us like what? How long has it been? 30 minutes, and I've been talking most of the time. I could have probably done this in like 10 minutes had I not explained every single detail, right? But it took us an hour to create this. So, good to know. Good to know how to basically create a simple storyline base. And once you have the loop set up, it just matters on where you point your stages, your next sequences. You can create actions that can basically look within the same room, and you don't have to change any stages. You simply look around and do something within the room, etc., etc. But I've only simplified this to a very basic set, nothing complicated. But here you could essentially, whisper, but you're not moving to a different stage. You'd be going back to stage one, and maybe that would have a some sort of extra value, like result. What happens when you whisper? You have a response, right? Or someone else speaks, or you hear something happen. So you can extend the details of each individual option in the stage to your desire based on this sort of algorithm. And that's it. Super basic algorithm to create a storyline. It didn't really take too much coding. I mean, it took 30 lines of code. So it's good to see, good to go over, especially if you wanted to create your own storyline adventure and then give it to your friends using like a HTML file or something. And the cool thing is, you create this in HTML and JavaScript, sorry. You basically copy and paste it to your friend. They don't have to install anything, they don't have to go through any extra details. All you have to do is copy and paste the game, create your little adventure JavaScript game loop. Very simple. And then create the data, which is really more where the work is. The actual data set for your storyline is going to go from stage 0, the loading of the game, and then it's going to direct based on the button that you click, the option that you basically select. That option being activated on an on-click basis. So you go stage 1, start the game, you wake up in the middle of the dark space, etc. And then you are presented with 3 more, like this, right? You wake up in the middle of the dark space, you cannot see anything, try to feel around. Maybe you find an object. Maybe you create an inventory now. An inventory could be a secondary JSON data file where you create just a blank or an updating list. Or, well, in this case for JavaScript, probably difficult because we can't really write files on the computer, a limitation of browsers. Browsers, for security reasons, don't necessarily give us the ability to have flexibility with files. So maybe you'll have a live variable that keeps track of these, and then a sequence of a string that a user, can copy and paste to get those files back. Those are like the old days where you would use a specific game code to load up, a file or a place that you left off last in the game. And that game code would generate based on the current data set information, like a little bit of an encrypted sort of code based on the items you have, the level you're currently at, put them all together into a single little code, and then you get the user to copy it, and then you paste it back in. A lot of math on that one though, because you have to essentially, well, encrypt a bunch of stuff into a crypto-based algorithm. Like call it an MD5 sum too. All right, well that's it. That's how you create your basic game storyline. Super basic, but it gives you an idea of how we use loops, how we use variables, how we use a secondary file, an actual case where we're separating all of our file values and we use them together into one program. Again, there are limitations in JavaScript. It's not perfect. Like you wouldn't, if you wanted to make a true big game, I mean, you can do it in Python, C++, all those. But in the end, we went through the logic. And the logic will be the same between all of the languages. C++, Java, Python, whatever you decide to make your game in, this logic still stands. And the process you would use is similar. So like and subscribe if you like this kind of content. I'll keep making more and more details on random stuff that pops up. Or if anyone asks any questions, I'm always happy to answer either live as we are now, or in a whole new video, so you can kind of get an idea of your question live. Thanks for joining. Till next time. Oh.